Hey everyone, how's it going? So since Red and Blue, we've had legendary Pokemon, and they're usually thought of as the strongest Pokemon in the entire game. Now this is generally true, I mean most legendaries are better than most non-legendaries. However, there are some non-legendaries that are better than legendaries, and there are some legendaries that are way worse than a lot of non-legendaries. I might focus on the former in another video, but for this video, I want to look at the legendaries that just aren't so good. And so while these might not be bad Pokemon, but simply in a battle setting, specifically single battles because I don't know if they have a niche in doubles, which I don't really play, these Pokemon are not that good. Alright, so let's begin at number 10, and we actually start in Sun and Moon with Guslord. So I thought Guslord would be a really good Pokemon. I mean, it's the last Ultra Beast you catch, so it's bound to be one of the best, you'd think. But no, not only is Guslord not one of the best, it's the worst legendary in Sun and Moon, by far in my opinion. I mean, why is it so bad? Its stat distribution is just really odd. I mean, a lot of the Ultra Beasts have weird stat distributions, but none of them are as strange as Guslord's. So Guslord has a ton of HP. I mean, it's third best to Chansey or Blissey. But it has the same overall base stat total of 570, meaning the rest of its stats aren't going to be that great. Like, attack and special attack are good. They might even be very good. I mean, 100, that's fine. But its defense and special defense are abysmal, and its speed is awful. So here you have this kind of frail Pokemon, but with a lot of HP and decent attack. I mean, how do you use that competitively? And think about how many things it has to look out for. But yeah, it's weak to Fairy, Dragon, Ice, Bug, and Fighting. Like, this thing has to watch out for a whole bunch of different move types, and it's not going to be fast enough to get off the first hit. And it may take one hit, but it's definitely not going to take two. And the whole thing with the Ultra Beast is their Beast Boost ability is really useful when something sticks around, but Guslord simply won't. And because of its odd stat distribution and its just non-beneficial typing, I have no choice but to put this Pokemon at number 10. Alright, so moving on to number 9, we have Hoopa Confined, and I think I'm doing a rhyme. Alright, I'm going to stop with that. This actually was unintentional. Anyway, Hoopa Confined's biggest problem is its typing. I mean, its defense is terrible, and so is its speed, but it has great special attack and special defense, but you just need to use one attack, and it's gone, and that attack is knockoff. So Hoopa Confined is Psychic Ghost, and yeah, just use dark moves against Hoopa Confined, it really can't do much. Or even a ghost move, but like, knockoff is just so common, especially because it's tutorable in Oris, and you can still bring Pokemon over, and it probably will be tutorable again in whatever remake they bring out this time around. So, Hoopa Confined, not very good, and I don't know why you'd use it rather than Hoopa Unbound. Even in like lower tiers, I find this Pokemon just too slow to really do much. I mean, you could give it a Choice Scarf, but it's almost better with Focus Sash because you avoid that one-hit KO. I mean, again, if you get rid of its counters, which are only 2 in this case, it's possible, but both counters just do way too much damage for Hoopa Confined to really be useful. Okay, so moving on to number 8, we have a Pokemon I quite like, and probably because it's not as good as a lot of its other legendary cousins, and that's Virizion. So Virizion is generally used only in lower tiers, and there's a good reason for that. Its stat distribution is actually not bad. I mean, you look at that and you think, alright, even distribution, most things are pretty good. I mean, it can be both a physical and special attacker. It has very good special defense, great speed. I mean, this thing's pretty versatile. Why wouldn't this thing be in a higher tier? And in my opinion, 2 things really set Virizion apart in a negative way. One is its shallow move pool. I mean, it kind of looks to be a wall, and it doesn't get such useful moves like Stealth Rock or Leech Seed. Also, Grass Fighting just isn't very good for a wall, and to be a good sweeper, it just doesn't get moves you'd want it to know. Like, it's not that fast, and it can get really countered easily by, like, any flying type, or even, like, Fire, Psychic, Ice, Fairy, or Poison. That's a lot of things to be weak to, so if you invest in, like, sweeping, it's going to go down really easily, and if you invest in walling, it's not going to be able to wall that effectively. Alright, so moving on to number 7, we have Mesprit. And the thing with Mesprit is that you just have to compare it to the other 2 Lake Guardians to see why it's not that good. So you have a Zelf, which has great speed, attack, and special attack. So it's a sweeper, it can be a mixed sweeper, or it can be one of the 2. You really never know, and that's what makes it so dangerous. These Pokemon all have really deep move pools, so they can learn a whole bunch of different moves. I've never seen 2 Zelf that are identical, and I never like to face one of these things. Uxie is a good wall. It being Psychic type doesn't make it a great wall, but I've used it in higher tiers. It can know Stealth Rocks, it can know Yawn, it can be a real pain to deal with. Mesprit, on the other hand, is sort of the classic Jack of all trades, master of none. For whatever reason, it's the slowest of the 3, and I'm not sure why. But in Pokemon, you don't need one Pokemon to be great at everything. You basically want your team to be great at everything. Like, you can run an Uxie and an Azelf because, they don't complement each other well because they're both Psychic type, but theoretically, the stats kind of work in complementing each other well. Mesprit, on the other hand, really doesn't do much well, and yes, it has a deep move pool, and I use it in lower tiers because I can't use Uxie, but that's basically it. It's not as good Uxie. That's kind of how I see it being used. I mean, you can use it as not as good as Zelf, but it's just too slow to be a sweeper. The long and the short of it is, Mesprit doesn't really have its own niche, and that's so important in the competitive metagame, and that's why it's on the list. Okay, so let's move on to number 6, where we have Regirock. Now, Regirock, if you look at its stats, is clearly supposed to be a physical wall, and it's decent at it, I guess. I mean, Rock type isn't the best type. I would say Steel is, just because it has fewer weaknesses and more resistances, but Regirock's biggest problem is access to recovery. Really, what sets apart great walls from not so great walls is how they can recover their health and just last a long time. Regirock doesn't have great options. It has Drain Punch, which isn't great. It has Rest, which is even worse, and it has Leftovers, which just doesn't heal enough. So the thing with Rest is that when you're asleep, you're completely defenseless, and Regirock's speed and special defense, they're not fantastic, nor are its HP, so you can sort of swap in a special attacker and usually do away with Regirock, and that's what really holds it back. And speaking of the Reggies, we move on to number 5 with Reggie Steele. So, Reggie Steele has the exact same problem as Mesprit. It is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. So, Regice is the special defensive Pokemon, Regirock is the defensive Pokemon, Reggie Steele is the both Pokemon. And all the same problems with Regirock apply, except it is Steel type but doesn't have as good defense. So you take the good with the bad, but it just doesn't have access to recovery. I mean, it's the exact same problem. I don't even think Reggie Steele, I'm just going to check, does it even get Drain Punch? It doesn't. So Reggie Steele is worse in pretty much every way than Regirock, and I already said I don't think Regirock is that great. Alright, so I'm going to be honest, I really don't want to put this Pokemon here. It's one of my favorites of all time, and I do run one competitively, and even I have to admit, it might even deserve to be higher on the list, and that's Articuno. So Articuno has great stats. You should be able to use this as a great special wall if Game Freak designed types properly. I mean, look at those stats. Great special defense, its defense is also very good, good HP, its speed isn't bad either. I mean, come on, why is this thing bad? Well, it's an ice type, and no ice type is good at defending, because ice resists one thing: ice. So that doesn't make it a very good wall, and it's weak to such common attacking types as fire, fighting, rock, and you don't see steel too often, but it's weak to that too. Plus, you get double damage to stealth rocks, and Articuno is also flying type, so it takes 50% of its health if there are stealth rocks on the field, and there is almost always stealth rocks on the field. Like, maybe you got rid of stealth rocks, and if you did, Articuno's a bit better, but it still is weak to rock, fire, electricity now because it's flying, and steel. So there are lots of different Pokemon that can easily take it down. Unfortunately, until Game Freak gives Ice some more resistances, any Pokemon that's trying to be an Ice type and defensive is just going to fail miserably. Speaking of which, we have our third legendary Titan, Regice, at number 3. So a lot of the problems I talked about with Articuno apply to Regice, and then more. And you might say, actually, it looks like Regice should be a better Articuno. I mean, it doesn't have that flying type, so it's only 25% from Stealth Rocks, plus its special defense is even higher. Like, why wouldn't Regice be better? Well, good points, but here's the big problem with Regice. First off, it doesn't have any access to recovery, and this is pretty much the nail in its coffin. So, it's a type that's weak to a lot of different attacks, doesn't resist many, and has no recovery, so it can be easily whittled down. Plus, it's slow. I mean, Articuno isn't fast per se, but it has decent speed. Regice is just way too slow and is going to be outsped by pretty much everything in the game, except for like another wall. Regice is just so useless. I mean, of the Reggies, I'm really confident with Rock being the best, but none of them are very good. And having a special defensive Pokemon for an Ice Pokemon that its biggest threats are probably physical moves just doesn't work in the current competitive metagame, in my opinion. Alright, so at number 2, we have Fiona. What's that noise? That noise is people writing comments in how I'm an idiot and that Fiona shouldn't be on this list. So if you don't know why this might be controversial, I just found out about this recently. So let's talk about why Fiona might be a controversial listing, because the problem is not whether or not this thing's any good. I mean, look at those stats. 80 base power, that's terrible. I mean, this thing is not even a jack of all trades. It's just terrible. One of the worst Pokemon that is like fully evolved. But the problem is actually whether or not this thing is legendary. Now, and I'm going to get that like one comment where they're like, actually, it's a mythical Pokemon. But yeah, I've already said that I'm classifying a mythical as kind of a subset of legendary. So the difference really is that legendary are Pokemon you can catch in game, like Moltres or Articuno, while mythical are usually event exclusive, like Mew or Celebi or Deoxys. Although Deoxys you can catch in Oris, but it's still mythical for some reason. Whatever. So Manaphy is a mythical Pokemon, and if you breed Manaphy with Ditto, you get Fiona. I don't know if Fiona's ever been given as a Fiona. In fact, the first way I obtained it was by obtaining a Manaphy for that 20th anniversary thing and breeding it with Ditto. And therein lies why people think it's not mythical. I mean, no other mythical or legendary Pokemon can breed, so Fiona must not be mythical. Because not only can you get Fiona by breeding Manaphy and Ditto, you can breed Fiona and Ditto to get more Fiona. However, there are lots of reasons to think it is mythical. I mean, in-game, it's pretty much treated as a mythical in every way. Its place in the Pokedex, the fact that you can't use it in certain VGCs, the fact that in the Battle Frontier and the Battle Subway, it can't be used, or the Battle Maison. I mean, in almost every single way, the game treats Fiona as mythical. And to me, that is the ultimate source of authority. I don't really care what anyone at Game Freak says. If you're treating it as mythical in-game, it's mythical. But a lot of people are unconvinced by that argument, so if you do disagree with me, let me know. But yeah, Fiona is just terrible. I mean, it has like no recovery, it has terrible stats, it has a really shallow move pool, it's just plain trash. So let's move on now to number 1. And at number 1, if you remember to like my second video ever, people were mad I didn't talk about its ability, but for this list, I have no qualms putting Regigigas on the list. And if you don't know where that's from, watch like the anime scene where it appears. It's really funny. But yeah, Regigigas is just awful. I mean, it is one of the worst Pokemon in the entire game. And why? Because it has great stats. Well, Slow Start basically halves its speed and attack for the first 5 turns. Now, I don't know how much Pokemon you play, but most battles last like 20 turns or whatnot. So 5 turns is a really, really long time. And Regigigas is also the only Pokemon in the entire game that cannot learn Rest. So its recovery options are limited to Drain Punch and Leftovers. They made sure you really had trouble stalling out those 5 turns. And yeah, once you do, it's a pretty decent Pokemon. But Regigigas is a great example that has a really, really, really terrible move pool. And yeah, that's why it's number 1. I mean, I wish I had more to say about it because it's my number 1 Pokemon, but like, it just plain sucks. It doesn't even get like a cool signature move or anything. And I do feel it's kind of fitting for it to be number 1 because the 3 other legendary golems are on the list, so it makes sense that their leader would be number 1. And that's all for this video. So it was a longer video than usual, but I hope you enjoyed. So if you guys disagree with anyone on the list or feel there's something I left off, please let me know. I really do enjoy reading your guys' comments, and it helps expand my knowledge of Pokemon. So yeah, once again, I hope you enjoyed, and take care.